Hello and welcome to another video for R programming. In this video we will be taking a look at data frames. First we'll look at how to create a data frame, then we will look at functions which are useful for retrieving information about certain data structures. We'll also take a look at indexing into a data frame to pull out a subset of information, including how to use logicals as indices. So let's begin by creating an example set of components to form our data frame. Using the data.frame function, we will combine all these components to create our data frame. Now if I use the drop-down menu on our data frame, you can see that there are 8 observations and 4 variables, that there's this Q1 and Q2, which are just going to be the quarterly stock prices, which market, one of 2 markets, either NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, and then there's this risk variable, which is ordered with 3 levels. One of the nice things about using the data.frame function is that whenever you have a character vector, it's going to automatically recognize that as being a factor. Something you have to keep in mind though is that if you want that factor to be ordered, you still need to make sure that the component, so the original vector itself, you still need to use the factor function in combination with the proper options to go along with it. If we pull up this into view, we can see that our data frame has row names, so it's going to be each of the companies, and then we have our 4 different variables, whether it be the first or second quarter stock price, which market, and the risk associated with that company's stock. To create this as row names, we'll see that up here in the code the very first option was row.names equals 1. Now had this been run without that option, we'll see that now names is a column. So if you're wanting to use a column of information as row names, like in this case, because everything was its own unique name, then it's probably good practice to go on ahead and just keep that as row names. Then it's not just a column. We'll also see here in a little bit how that can be useful for indexing. The next thing we'll take a look at are these 4 functions, which can be really useful for retrieving some just basic information about structures in general, not just data frames. If I were to look at dim on our data frame, we'll see that it returns 8 and 4, so we have our 8 observations and our 4 variables. The next useful function would be head, and what that is going to do is return the first 6 rows in addition to all the columns. This being only 8 observations doesn't seem like it's simplifying it very much, but you can imagine if you had thousands and thousands of rows, you wouldn't want to eat up all your console space by returning everything. Another useful function is str for structure, and this can kind of give you some basic information about the different variable types you have for each column, as well as the dimensionality of the object. Notice that this information is also the same as you would see up in the global environment window whenever you use the drop-down menu. And then the last function is going to be the summary function, which is just going to return summary statistics if it's a quantitative variable. And in the case of these last 2 for market and risk, they were categorical variables, so it's letting us know how many we have of each level. The last thing we want to take a look at when it comes to data frames is going to be indexing. And we have some simple examples here. If we look at indexing to where we want just a single element, then you can do this in a similar way as you would with a matrix. We're going to use brackets 1, 2. That would return the first row and second column. In this case would be the value 150.02, but we could also use the row name and the column name because we had those also included inside of our data frame. So if I pull this back up, we'll see that of course the first row, second column is that value 150.02, but if you couldn't remember where IBM was located in this list of companies, and you couldn't remember if Q2 was the second column, the third column, and so forth, then that's where it can be useful to use these names. You just have to make sure that you're going to remember to put those inside of single quotes or double quotes. So IBM will come first because you need to index the row, of course, and then the next piece would be Q2. And we'll see that it returns the same value. So we do a similar thing. If we wanted, say, a row vector, you just leave the row empty. Same case here. If you wanted to use names, just use the second place, the column piece blank, so then it would return all the columns. If you wanted, let's say, a subset of a certain column, like in this case here, where we wanted the 3rd through the 7th values of the risk column, we can put in 3:7 to give us the 3rd through the 7th rows for that risk column, then use the name there. Another handy thing you can do though is to use this $ syntax. And what this is going to do is look at the stocks data frame, then just grab the column risk, and then you can just index that result. So let's see what this would look like just running this piece first. We'll see that it's going to return the entire column, low, medium, medium, low, and so forth. But then running the entire thing, we'll see that it's just going to give us that 3rd through 7th entries for that last column. So the $ syntax can be really useful whenever you have the column names. The last type of indexing I want to take a look at is going to be using logicals. So in this first example, let's say we had the question, what are the first quarter results for stocks that increased from quarter 1 to quarter 2? Well, we're interested in the first quarter results, so we would index into stocks, in this case just using the $ syntax, into Q1 to return that. But then we only want the results where quarter 2 was larger than quarter 1. So if we just took a look at the logical itself, we'll see that the 1st, 3rd, and 5th entries are true. So we could use this as a way to logically index into our column. It should return the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th entry. And so if we do that, we'll see indeed that's what happens. You can be a little bit more creative with this. For example, what data do we have on high-risk stocks? In this case, we're looking at all the information, so we would call upon the entire data frame. But then I would want to use the logical into the rows. So notice it's behind this first comma, stocks data frame, and then I'm going to be going into risk, and which of the risks are high would be a way to index into the rows, and then I want all the column information. We would see that we have Amazon and Apple, and then we have all the information corresponding to those. Another useful function here would be subset, and it would return the same thing. Which one's better? Not really one or the other, it's just based upon your preference. So this ends this video where we're talking about data frames. We hope you found it useful, and happy coding.